just going back to the driving, you mentioned before about, like refusing a swab and things like that if they're a patient. I
Mhm.
don't know if you saw, but just earlier this year, we had a win in the court with a patient who, for twice now, has been arrested for refusing a swab and a blood test. Both times he got off. And this time, the magistrates in the court actually said that they believed that his refusal of a swab and a blood test was a reasonable medical excuse. Now, we've talked before about needle phobias and things, how that's classed, and there's precedent in law that that is a reasonable reason to refuse a
Mhm.
blood sample. So, because that's actually now been said by the magistrates, unfortunately, it's not a precedent in law as yet because it's a magistrates' court, so it needs to go up to an appeal or a high court or something. But that is only a matter of time, and there are some cases coming up that we're dealing with where that situation has happened. So, if one of those cases goes, say they get convicted, and it goes up to the Court of Appeal, and we challenge it,
It's set at a
if we
level
win
where it
that,
would
that
be
will set a
effective.
precedent, and that's really exciting to me because that
Yeah.
means that every patient in the country will be able to refuse a swab and a blood test um, without having,
But
because nobody should
yeah,
be
a hundred.
subjected to that.
100% where it forces the 6 months later Daily Mail, lackluster police allow dopey drivers, and it'll basically be like, oh yeah, they're letting the prescription, and they'll draw such hypocrisy to it that they'll have to address the 2015 decision to move cannabis from 5A from 4 to 5A. They'll have to look at
Yeah,
this detection impairment paradigm, and then once
yeah,
they start to do that, anything they want to seek to do against the patient because of the disability discrimination and everything else, and the science, the unscrupulous science that is correct in this, they're going to have to come up with a new system, which means a new form of impairment detection, which I think means that, like I said, it'll just address the hypocrisy of wait, if he's got this in his level, but then got a piece of paper and he's fine. He's got less in him, but no piece of paper. Yet they're both equally
yeah,
fine. Do you know what I mean? Like you said, it forces equity, or rather
yeah,
equality, and not in outcome here, but in opportunity of outcome, which is what I think is really important here. There shouldn't be a pre-existing prejudice or a preference because one has a paper and the other doesn't. So yeah, that is important, and more people challenge that. As I keep advising, I do state in said situation, do not, if you directly refuse a swab and do not quantify it, you potentially could go to a failure to provide, and they did to Michael Fisher, as we spoke of earlier. Whereas if you
yeah.
clarify to them that under the Road Traffic Act 1988, you can be assessed for impairment and you are willing to do that, that is not the same. You have shown willingness, so that will be beneficial towards your case. Again, this is not, as Guy is saying here, it's not precedent cases and it's hit a high enough level,
Yeah,
but it's a
yeah. I'm
common
not. I'm not
sense,
advising to
respectful approach.
refuse at the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, wait until
yeah,
we get the president. We'll publish it when we get that president, and then
yeah.
it's all good. And obviously, don't drive if you're impaired. Like it's common sense.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing of most people, cannabis consumers, it's not like alcohol. You then will wait, but in terms of it still being in your system, if you consume weed, especially if you consume it regularly, it's always going to be in your system, and that detection isn't the same as impairment. So it's basically you're running the risk anyway. So just be sensitive. Again, this is again not legal advice, but if you don't have a prescription, try and do what you can to reduce the smell of cannabis in the vehicle. Because if an officer pulls you over, smells the smell of cannabis in the vehicle, they can then go for a swab, and then you are kind of screwed. You have to go down one or two routes there. So anything you can do to reduce that smell, or I'm not going to give the other frame advice on the other side of it. That's too controversial. But basically, just be sensible and respectful. Like I said, don't run around. You can have an ACAB attitude at your heart, and God bless you. But in that moment, you've got to assess how you're going to deal with that. And if you deal with them respectfully, as Jeff Ditchfield always used to say, you've got to know the laws you intend to break. So study these things, look at the Road Traffic Act, and just be aware of your rights, and also be aware, as we've discussed for the past hour or so, the fact that a lot of these cops carry prejudice and ignorance of the law. They do not know that things changed and weed is weed in it. And again, they're going to try and escalate you. So you be as calm as possible. I would, again, not as legal advice, but I'd maybe request, if an officer escalates a situation like that, to request a supervisor. Even to request to film your own interaction as well and prepare your own defense, because cops generally don't like to be proven wrong in the law. even though most of them are not trained in the law, they're trained in policing, which is a very different thing because they don't enforce the law. They are not Judge Dredd. They go, well, I'm trained to stop this and put you cage. Then another man comes along and decides what it is. Do you know what I mean? So when you catch them in that paradigm, they can often feel as, almost like, prepubescent teenage boys and be a bit like kind of hurt by it and a bit, oh no, and offended. And they may lash out, not necessarily physically, but they may try and allegedly entrap you in other things. They may try and get you to say something you wouldn't want to, or find a reason to take your car keys and your house key and go look in your house or whatever. You just be sensible is all I'm trying to say here, folks. Until we get the victory in the law, protect yourself. Obviously, complain about the law and act against it in what ways you can, but in some ways, protect yourself. And then if you find yourself in these situations, someone like Guy's your man, and hopefully this, like I said, this new legal team that you're working with will give a much more streamlined system to get the people in and out of the courts, because there are many patients that are getting caught up in this. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. It will take time, but we are getting there slowly, bit by bit. And if anyone needs to contact me, it's cedarfuture@mail.com.